This is a 2007 Mercedes-Benz SLK55 AMG, and it's one of my favorite high-performance Mercedes models from this era. That's because it has a 355 horsepower naturally aspirated V8 in a car about the same size as a Mazda Miata. I've always felt that these were very underrated, and today I'm going to review this SLK55 and show you why. Before I get started, big news, this SLK55 is currently for sale, being auctioned live on Cars and Bids, which is my enthusiast car auction website. This car has some great options and a beautiful color, and of course a massive V8 in a car that never really should have had a massive V8, which is a good thing. So once you finish watching this video, click the link in the description below to head over to the live auction for this SLK55, where you can bid on this car and buy it only at Cars and Bids. So let's talk SLK55. Now the SLK first came out in the late 90s, and there was a performance version called the SLK32, which was pretty cool, but it had a supercharged V6. When the second generation SLK came out, Mercedes decided to take it all the way, and they created the SLK55 with a naturally aspirated 355 horsepower V8 in a car about the same size as a Miata. Later SLK AMG models ditched the V8 and went back to a V6, almost as if Mercedes was admitting, okay, we got a little too carried away, so let's dial it back a bit. And so this is the one to have. Now, unfortunately, most people don't know much about the SLK55 because the SLK kind of developed a reputation for being too soft or not masculine enough, but I always felt that this car was overlooked. It has a lot of great benefits. V8 power, small size, rear-wheel drive, two-seat roadster with a cool folding hardtop. And today I'm going to show you all of it. First, I'll take you on a tour of the SLK55 and show you all of its interesting quirks and features. Then I'll get it out on the road and drive it, and then I'll give it a Doug score. Alright, I'm going to start the quirks and features of the SLK55 on the inside, where it is surprisingly quirky in here, and where you'll find one of my very favorite car features ever, and that would be air scarf. Alright, check this out. On the seat back, on the headrest, you can see there's a vent here, and that vent can blow warm air on the back of your neck while you're driving. So, on a cold night, you want the roof down, but you're afraid you'll get too cold, you can turn on air scarf and have warm air blow on your neck, and that's why they call it air scarf, because it's like a scarf you're wearing of air coming from the seat back, and it is brilliant. Now, you turn on air scarf with this little button here, and there's one for each side, driver and passenger, so you can turn on air scarf and then turn on the warm air blowing on your neck, which will warm you up and allow you more top-down cool nights. It is a fantastic feature, truly one of my very favorites. But anyway, next up, moving on to the rest of the quirks and features and the rather quirky SLK interior, next I want to cover the controls in the center console, which are kind of strange. You can see there are two like circular dial things and then U-shaped buttons surrounding them, and it's a little weird. Now the main control on the right, that's for the convertible top, to raise or lower it. You can see arrows pointing up or down, and obviously you push this little switch up or down to raise or lower the top. Pretty simple. The weird part is that the U-shaped group of buttons around it, there are three. Two are blank, and one puts the car in tow mode. So you have the convertible top switch there, two blank buttons, and then tow mode, which doesn't really go together, kind of strange. But it gets even weirder. Over on the other side of the center console, you can see the same size and shape dial as the convertible top control. This is used to adjust your power mirrors. And the three U-shaped buttons along the bottom, the left one is the left mirror, the right one is the right mirror, and then there's a blank one in the center. And so your convertible top control has the exact same size and shape as your power mirror control. They're right next to each other in the center. And this is especially interesting because in this car, you don't have to go through some special procedure to put the top down. You don't have to be in like some special mode or have the parking brake up. You can just press the button and have it go down, meaning meaning you could theoretically go to adjust your mirror, press the wrong button, and have the top start to go down, which is kind of strange. And it's just weird to see those two things in there, same size and basically the same place. But anyway, next up, let's talk cup holders in here. Now, the center console is pretty crowded with stuff, so there's no room for cup holders in this car, but that wouldn't do. Mercedes had to have them, and so they're hidden. You press this little silver strip above the center screen and they pop out, so you can put your cups in there. Probably the worst place in the planet for cups, because condensation happens, liquid will drip down all over your buttons and your expensive center screen. You'd never want to put any cups there, but there are cup holders, so you can do it if you absolutely have to. Also weird in this area is the climate vents in this car. The outer climate vents are like oval shaped, which is kind of neat, I guess, whatever. The center climate vents are fairly normal rectangles, except they're flanked by these little vents, which almost look like the infotainment system has ears. The weird thing about these vents is they do nothing. You turn up the climate control as high as it will go, air blows out these center vents, but nothing is coming out of these little ear-shaped vents in the middle. It's almost like they added more climate vents for style purposes. I'm not exactly sure. You can see you also can't like adjust where these vents go or open or close them, so they're really not intended for airflow. They're just kind of there, your center dashboard ears. Also, another interesting item in this interior, something I always loved actually, is the placement of the window switches in this car. They're on the grab handle to close the door, and you can see they're nicely integrated like at the top of the grab handle, and it just looks really cool, and it's a cool place to have them, and I like that they did that. Next up, another interesting item in this interior is the glove box. Now, from the outside, it looks like a fairly standard glove box in a fairly standard positioning, but when you open the glove box, you can see it is mostly taken up by the CD changer. In fact, you basically have no room for any real storage in that glove box. So there are other storage spots in this interior. You can see the center console storage areas here. Normally you have a lid on it, but in this car it broke off. But there's also a second storage spot behind that, sort of between the seat backrests. You can open this up and you can see it is pretty big, and there's even a spot for the owner's manual. That would be the factory owner's manual location in this car, in this secondary storage area between the seats. Unfortunately, this storage area doesn't lock, and the glove box doesn't lock either. So if you're looking for locking storage in the interior of this car, well, you don't have it. So don't park it with the roof down and something valuable in one of these storage areas. But anyway, talking about this center storage area between the seats, let's discuss the seats for a second. They are two-tone. You can see black and sort of a light gray to match the rest of the interior, which is also two-tone black and light gray, and they look kind of nice, and they have nice stitching, and that's all fairly standard. The interesting thing to mention here, behind the seats, you have these roll bars, and on the roll bars, you can see they're trimmed in plastic, but they have fake plastic stitching. Look at this. There are little like fake stitch marks around what must be a fake seam in the plastic, I guess to make it look like leather with stitching, but it absolutely isn't that. You have fake stitching in plastic. This is something I have never seen before in any car, trying to make plastic look classier with fake stitching. Plastic doesn't have to be stitched. It's very weird. But anyway, last thing in this interior, I want to talk technology. This car, as you can imagine, 2007 model, getting pretty old, and the tech is getting pretty old. The center screen, not a touch screen, not really especially all that usable, but it's there, and it does have a map, which I guess can be kind of helpful when you're driving, and of course music and that sort of thing. There's more usability in the gauge cluster area. You can see two standard gauges like you'd expect, but there's a screen at the top and bottom of this. The lower screen gives you real-time speed while you're driving, which is nice and useful to have. The upper screen goes through some other info that could be helpful, like your trip odometer and trip status, and also the music you're listening to, that sort of thing. So that's relatively useful screen technology in the gauge cluster. By the way, one other thing in this vicinity, you can see if you look below the dashboard an airbag sign. That's because this car has knee airbags, which is a nice feature, and it even has knee airbags over on the passenger side. You can see regular airbag at the top and then a second airbag location at the bottom. I guess Mercedes felt this interior was so small that the occupants might hit the dashboard, and so knee airbags could provide good protection, and that's certainly true, and it's nice to see that little extra safety feature here. But anyway, next up, let's talk roof. Now, the SLK originally came out mid-late 1990s, and it was a big deal because it had a folding hardtop. Not too many cars had one up to that point, especially at that price level. It was like the entry-level Mercedes-Benz convertible, and it had a folding hardtop. It was really cool. Now, by the time this version came out, this is the second generation SLK, folding hardtops had gotten more common. so it wasn't that crazy, but it's still a neat trick. Now, to operate the top, you press the little top switch in the center like I showed you, and then it just folds back, and you can see it going through the process. Fairly standard folding hardtop situation in this car. Nothing too unusual or too quirky here, but it's neat to have a hardtop, so when you want to drive in like snow or rain or cold, you really are feeling like you're in a coupe rather than a soft top convertible. And when you want to go to put the top up, pretty simple, just press this button and the top goes right back up. Again, fully automatic. You don't have to do anything. There's no latching like around the top of the windshield like there were for some convertible models from this era, the mid-2000s. Some of them even with power tops, you had to latch them, but not this. It was a fully automated process and you didn't do anything. You just kind of sat there and let the car do its thing, and then the folding hardtop was back in place and you felt like you were back in a coupe, and it was a neat little trick that this car had. Now, a couple of interesting things about the hardtop situation. For one, the SLK has little quarter windows that roll down. You can see sort of in the back behind the main window in the door, there are quarter windows. You cannot control these. There's no like window switch for these. Instead, it functions only with the top. When the top goes down, the quarter window goes down. When the top goes back up, the quarter window goes back up. And it's kind of interesting to see that there in a car that doesn't have back seats, sort of an extra window that rolls down for what would be the back seat, but there isn't one. Another interesting thing about this car in the top situation, air scarf does still work when the top is up. So if you're really cold and you want to be really warm, you can turn on the heated seats in this car, you can turn on the regular heater, but you can also turn on air scarf even with the top up, so you can have warm air blowing on your neck if that's something you want, even when the roof is in place. But there is one big drawback to a folding hardtop. As nice as it is to have a hardtop in place on a cold day, and as cool as it is to show your friends like a folding hardtop going down, it is physically larger than a folding soft top, and that means it takes some of your cargo space. And Mercedes-Benz had an interesting solution for this. When you open up the trunk, you can see there's like this plastic lid in the trunk area, and it's kind of strange. You're wondering what exactly that is. Well, when the lid is down in the position where it is right now, the convertible top can be lowered, so you can drive around with an open roof if you want it to. Or if you need more storage space back here, with the convertible top up, you can actually move the lid upward and give yourself more cargo space, as you can see. Now, the benefit to this is obvious. You've moved the lid out of the way and you can put more stuff in your trunk. But the drawback is, with the lid up, the convertible top cannot go down. So if you want to use your full trunk, your cargo area, you can do that, but the top won't go down unless the lid is down. And of course, the lid significantly limits what you can put in your cargo area. It's sort of an interesting design, but it does give you the option of using your full cargo area. You just can't put the top down. But the coolest thing around the back in the SLK has nothing to do with the cargo area. Instead, that would be the exhaust. For one thing, take a look at it. Quad pipes like a true AMG car. Just looks great, and it sounds great too. This is an NA V8 and you can hear it. Take a listen. And as if the sound wasn't enough, this car also showed off its AMG status with a couple of cool, subtle upgrades on the outside. Now, I already showed you the quad exhaust pipes. That's one of them. Made it look like a true AMG car. You also have these flared rocker panels down the side. Give it a little bit more of a sporty look compared to the regular SLK. I like that. And you have these multi-spoke wheels, which are sort of a shared design with the SL55 at the time. Again, a nice AMG styling touch. But my very favorite AMG touch on this car was these little inlets on the side of the front bumper directly in front of the front wheels. It was a nice little AMG only styling touch that the SLK55s had, and I've always felt that was a cool little detail that helped distinguish them from the normal cars. But anyway, since I'm talking exterior styling stuff with this car, I might as well share my general thoughts on the look of this SLK. Frankly, I like it. I actually liked all of the SLK models, all three generations, and this one was probably my very favorite one. They're not particularly incredibly beautiful, but they're certainly not ugly. They were nice looking cars, and I generally liked the look, especially of the SLK55 models with their subtle AMG styling upgrades. But my very favorite styling feature of this car was undoubtedly in front, where you had the hood shaped like a baby version of the Mercedes SLR. That was their supercar at the time, and that car's hood came to this like very famous point in front you can see, and this car had a pretty similar hood. They were trying to give it sort of that similar look, like a smaller version of the SLR. And I always thought that was kind of a cool little design touch touch, tying in this car to the Mercedes flagship supercar at the time. And finally, we move under the hood, and there it is, that naturally aspirated V8 that I keep talking about. Yes, it really was 355 horsepower in this little car, and yes, the SLK really was the size of a Miata. This generation SLK was about 2 inches longer than the NC Miata, which came out at the same time. And looking at this engine in this engine bay, you can see they really stuffed it in here. Truthfully, this engine was probably a little bit too big for this car, but they made it work and delivered this crazy tiny roadster with a big V8. This was the time when big naturally aspirated engines were going in everything. The Audi RS4 had a V8, the BMW M3 had a V8, the M5 had a V10, the Carrera GT had a V10, everything had a big naturally aspirated engine, and so the SLK did too. Now, crazily, there was a version of this car with even more power. There was an SLK55 AMG Black Series version, which had 395 horsepower, and it had a fixed hardtop instead of a retractable convertible top. Unfortunately, the Black Series of this car was never sold here in North America. It was the only Black Series we didn't get. So for Americans, this was the best you could do in the SLK world. And with this massive engine, it was pretty good. And so those are the quirks and features of the SLK55 AMG. Now it's time to get it out on the road and see how it drives. All right, driving the SLK55. I have always liked this car. Although actually, that's not entirely true. I have liked this car for years. I rented one of these on Turo when I was in Charleston, South Carolina. It was the coolest car on Turo in Charleston. I was like, yeah, I'll give it a shot. And the dude had it like straight piped because there's no rules in South Carolina. And I drove it around and it was way too loud and I just loved it. I thought it was the coolest thing. And it was at that moment, it was probably about 4 years ago, when I realized that this car is like pretty underrated. And I think the problem is people don't really have a lot of respect for the SLK because, you know, the Z4 is a more sporty car, and the Boxster is a more sporty car, and the Cayman. And so they look at the SLK and they think, oh, it's kind of has soft styling and it's a Mercedes, it's not a true sports car. And I get that for a lot of the SLK models, but this one has a V8 stuffed under the hood. I mean, this thing didn't screw around. So let's talk driving. The thing I love most about this car is it's just plain fast. It is just plain fast. I think 0 to 60 is in the 4s, and it certainly feels fast. The engine's got a lot of power and a lot of torque and a lot of low end. So you floor it on the highway especially. This is really where the car shines. That's not usually true of roadsters like this. Boxsters and Z4s, most of their powertrains, you got to go high in the rev range to go and get power. Not this car. You just kind of feather the throttle a little bit and you hear the power and you feel the torque, and it's a lot of motor and it's a lot of car. And the other cool thing about this car, and something that, again, I feel this car is just underrated, not enough people talk about, is it handles. It handles well. This car, being an AMG model that had sportier suspension and bigger wheels, it just felt pretty good. Now, I grant you, it's not a Boxster in terms of handling, but I don't remember there being a V8 Boxster. You know? Like, this car has some nice benefits, and it fits in with that AMG sort of muscle car theme. It's not quite the finesse car, but it's got that big, bulky powertrain under the hood. Now, whenever I'm describing this car to people, which is very rare, because most people don't ask me about this car, they're not really all that common or not really all that well known. But when I'm talking about this car to people, I always talk about it as a V8 Miata. And that's true in a lot of ways. Obviously, this car doesn't have the lightness or the eager chassis of the Miata, you know. It's not quite as fun to toss around. There's no manual transmission, that sort of thing. But it is the same size as the Miata. It is a 2-seat roadster like a Miata. It has the kind of the same overall theme to it. It's just sort of more luxurious. It's what it really is like a V8 luxury Miata. You trade the eager chassis and the manual for, you know, air scarf and heated seats. And some people are out there saying, why would I want that? That's the best part of the Miata. And some people are saying, hey, that car has a lot of the good things about the Miata plus some more nice stuff that I want. And that was who this car appealed to. And putting the V8 in the, I mean, that was kind of representative of that era. Like I mentioned earlier, you had the V8 S4, and the V8 M3, and the V10 M5. That was what people were doing. They were putting massive engines into these cars. It was kind of the last swan song of the powerful NA big engine. And this car has it. And it was a rare thing. They did another SLK55 in the next generation, and for a couple of years it kept the same V8, but then they switched back to a turbo V6. And the V6, I don't know, maybe it had more power, but that wasn't the point. This car had an NAV. I mean, it was a serious powertrain. It was just amazing that it existed. Overall, I think these cars are really cool, and frankly, they're pretty well priced. And this V8 was the reliable one. You know, Mercedes AMG had some engines that were questionable and some engines that weren't, and this one is one of the more reliable ones. For the money, I think this car offers a lot. Its big drawback has always been that it just was an SLK, and so not a lot of people ever really paid it any attention. But it's the coolest SLK that has ever existed, and I think one of the coolest little roadsters that ever came out. There was never a V8 Boxster, there was never a V8 Z4, Z3. It was too much. It was just too excessive, but they did it anyway for a few years, and I think that's cool. And so that's the Mercedes-Benz SLK55 AMG. These cars are hard to find as they weren't very popular. And yes, I know the SLK isn't a real sports car, blah, blah, blah. But this car is fun and fast, and it's got big power, and it's surprisingly cool and enjoyable. And you can buy it on Cars and Bids. Anyway, now it's time to give the SLK55 a DOUGSCORE. Starting with the weekend categories and styling, the SLK55 is reasonably attractive. It's not the most gorgeous car, but I think it looks nice, and it gets a 6 out of 10. Acceleration 0 to 60 is in the low 4s. It's quite fast, and it gets a 7 out of 10. Handling is sporty and spry, especially for a Mercedes, and it gets a 6 out of 10. Fun factor is decent. The car would be more fun with 3 pedals, but it's pretty cool to have a big V8 and that much power as is, and it gets a 6 out of 10. Finally, cool factor, and these haven't quite taken off as extremely cool yet. Most people count out the SLK, even though the AMG version is pretty cool. I think they deserve to be cooler, but for right now, it gets a 5 out of 10 for a total weekend score of 30 out of 50. Next up are the daily categories and features. The SLK55 is reasonably equipped for its time period, and it gets a 4 out of 10. Comfort, the ride is harsh, but not insanely so. Still, this isn't a car you'd buy for luxury and comfort, and it gets a 5 out of 10. Quality is okay, the interior is decent, and it's relatively reliable, but it's still an aging Mercedes, so cost could add up, and it gets a 6 out of 10. Practicality is normal for a car like this. 2 seats and a small trunk gives it a 2 out of 10. Finally, value, and I think these are great values. Big power, 2 seats, rear-wheel drive. It's a lot of fun for $15,000 to $25,000, and it gets a 7 out of 10 for a total daily score of 24 out of 50. Added up, and the DOUGSCORE is 54 out of 100, which places it here against relevant cars. The SLK55 ties the E46 M3, which I really stand by. The SLK is just as fun, if not more fun, and it's cheaper to buy and own. These SLK55s are often passed up or overlooked by enthusiasts looking for a fun car, but they should be on more people's radar. And Mercedes-Benz had an interesting way of dealing with this. You open up the trunk.